قال الشيخ الإمام العالم العلامة إمام الحرمين أبو المعالي عبد الملك بن أبي محمد عبد الله بن يوسف الجويني رحمه الله تعالى. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. He starts with the basmala, as we know that this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the messenger and those rightly guided. And then it says that this is a work that was written by Imam al-Alim al-Allama Imam al-Haramain. Imam al-Haramain Abu al-Ma'ali Abd al-Malik ibn Abi Muhammad Abdullah ibn Yusuf al-Juwayni rahimahullah ta'ala. Does anyone know why his name?
That's okay, we are fine.
Yes,
okay.
Okay. Does anyone know why he has the title of Imam al-Haramain? Does anyone remember why he was given this name?
He used to be an Imam of Medina and Mecca. He used to go back and forth.
So he used to go back between the two Haramain, teaching and giving fatwa and learning. Abu al-Ma'ali is his kunya. Abdul Malik is his first name. Ibn Abi Muhammad, who was his father, Abdullah ibn Yusuf al-Juwayni, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he says, هذه ورقات, that this is a few pages that I have brought together for you. تشتمل على معرفة فصول من أصول الفقه. What you're going to find in here, it is, some matters that deal with أصول الفقه. And what he's going to do now is he's going to tell you what these two words mean. And here he's going to break it down. Usul al-fiqh is made up of two words. And he tells you, I'm going to tell you what both of these words mean. So he says, وَذَلِكَ لَفْظٌ مُؤَلَّفٌ مِنْ جُزْئَيْنِ مُفْرَدَيْنِ. It's made up of two words. You have usul and you have fiqh. And he says, أَحَدُهُمَا usul. The first one is usul. The first word is usul. وَالْآخَرُ الْفِقْهِ. And the next word is fiqh. And then he goes, فَالْأَصْلُ مَا بُنِيَ عَلَيْهِ غَيْرُهُ. Al-asl, the mufrad of usul, the singular form of usul, it is what things are built upon. So the foundation, what you go and you build things upon. وَالْفَرْعُ مَا بُنِيَ عَلَى غَيْرِهِ. And then he gives you another word that he hasn't introduced yet, just to give you a better understanding of the foundation. And he says the far' is what is built on that foundation. Like you have the tree and then the branches and the leaves that come out of it. Then he goes, well, fiqh. Fiqh, for us to understand what it means. And here he's talking to us as the usuliyin. What does it mean? He says, معرفة الأحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد. It is knowing or the knowledge of al-ahkam, rulings, al-shar'iyya, of Islamic rulings, the Sharia rulings, التي طريقها الاجتهاد. That the only way that you are going to get to that understanding, it is through ijtihad. It is through your efforts, or here we'll say, your ability to deduce rulings from the Sharia itself. You look at the Quran, you look at the Sunnah, you look at Ijma', you look at Qiyas, and then you come and you bring a ruling. What this does here for us, he makes the understanding of fiqh, or the definition, very, very restrictive, to the point where it is only things that require ijtihad. So from it, one, all knowledge is not what he's talking about. Every type of ruling is not what he's talking about. Only rulings in Sharia that have to come by way of ijtihad. So things like as-salah, zakat, Sawm, Hajj, these things are out of it. These things is not what fiqh focuses on. The things that fiqh focuses on are things that you have to get to by way of ijtihad. For example, is praying salah in the masjid wajib? This is not something that you get to by way of looking at a verse in the Quran and Sunnah, and there's nothing that we can say about it. So the scholars have to come and they have to make ijtihad and come up with a ruling. And the rulings that he's going to come up with, they're going to be one of seven. So he says, وَالْأَحْكَامُ سَبْعَةٌ. He says the rulings are going to be seven. الواجب والمندوب والمباح والمحظور والمكروه والصحيح والباطل. We said the last time that we were together when we were going over this, these are not generally all of the rulings in the Sharia. Right? These are not all of the ahkam. But this is the beginner in usul al-fiqh. This is what he needs to understand. So he says there are seven of them. And the first one is al-wajib. And then you have al-mandub. So wajib, he gives the, every understanding. The first five that he mentions, they are ahkam al-taklifiyya. And the next two that he mentions are ahkam al-wad'iyya. And we talked about this the last time that we were together. He says, fal-wajib. What is wajib? How do you know something? Like, what does it mean when someone says this action is wajib? He tells you, ما يثاب على فعله ويعاقب على تركه. It is that if you do this thing, you're going to be rewarded for doing it. And if you leave it, you're going to be punished. This is how you know wajib. And we talked about wajib. The word that he should have given us here is what? What did we say? Ijab. We said ijab. Wajib is what we have to do. The ruling in the Sharh, like for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the example that we gave is وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Allah tells us to establish the prayer. Is this wajib? Does this show wajib to us? Or what does this show? It shows ijab. That Allah has, like nafsul khitab, what Allah is commanding you to do, that is called ijab. Then, if someone asks you, is salah wajib? And you say, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. And this is the wujub of salah. You've proven through this verse the wujub of salah. And then when you and I do it, it becomes wajib. Is that clear?
So it's like me, all the fara'id means it is wajib.
So all of the fara'id, wajib, yes. We talked about, so the only school that uses fard and wajib differently is a Hanafi school, the Hanafi madhab. Every other madhab, wajib is one thing, and fard is the same thing. There is no difference in one or the other. And then he says, wal mandubu. This is better known as sunnah. What is sunnah? And he says, ما يثاب على فعله ولا يعاقب على تركه. If you leave it, you're not going to be punished. But if you do it, you're going to be rewarded. Things like, for example, praying sunnah, fasting sunnah, praying qiyamul layl. These type of things, they're known as al-mandub. They're known as sunnah. These things, if you do them, you're going to be rewarded. If you leave them off, you're not going to be punished. But if you leave them off for too long, if you are constantly not a person that does any of the sunnah, then this is something that is disliked. Even though they're sunnahs, we should all have some portions of the sunnah that we enact, whether it's the prayer, whether it's the reading, and so on.
Is it the same as mustahab?
Mustahab, yes. So, mandub, sunnah, mustahab, mu'akkad, or like any of these things that mean it's not wajib, but you do it, you'll get rewarded. If you don't do it, you're not going to get punished. And the definition that he's given, are these the proper definitions? Or what kind of definition is he giving us? Who remembers? The definition that he's given us is not what it actually means, but he's showing you through the fruits of the action. He's telling you wajib, it's something that if you do it, you'll get rewarded for. And he does it for everything. But if you were to ask somebody else, what does wajib mean? I can't just, the full picture, you're not going to be given by this definition. The full picture of these definitions, for example, someone says, what is wajib? We would say, wajib, it is a definite command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, jaziman, like you have to do it. Like you don't have an option in this thing, right? That would be the definition of wajib. And then, or it's al-talab, jaziman, it is a command that you have to do. The mandub, talab, ghayru jazim. It is a command without it being you have to do it, right? That optional aspect. And the rulings apply for all of these five. Like the next thing that he says is, generally in our books, you would go wajib, then sunnah or mandub, and then you would go to makruh. And then, or you go to ibaha, and then you go to makruh, and then you go to haram. Here he does it a little bit different. He goes mubah, and then haram, and then makruh. Right? He makes these two different things. He says al-mubah. The mubah, ما لا يثاب على فعله ولا يعاقب على تركه. They're the things that whether you do them or you don't do them, you don't get punished or rewarded. In general, this is the ruling or the understanding of al-ibah. And if you were to say, give us the actual meaning, it is an action in which there is no inherent command for it or an inherent prohibition for it. For example, like eating and sleeping and drinking. and so on, right? Things that Allah has made ibaha. And this is a place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really opened the doors, right? It is so wide on the things that are considered, mubah. And just the foundation of rulings generally outside of ibadah is an ibaha, that it is something that is allowed, right? Outside of ruling until it is proven to you that this is something that is, falls into the other categories. So there's no inherent command nor inherent prohibition for this action itself. But they can fall into one of these based on the purpose of why it's being done or what is the reason for it happening. Someone that goes to sleep at night, he can either fall into it being a sleep that is going to be rewarded, a sleep that is going to be punished, or a sleep that is going to be just sleep. And that all depends on what? Your niyyah, the niyyah that you make before you go to sleep. And then he says, wal mahdhuru. We're going to switch the order around and say wal makruh. Right? So he says al makruh, the disliked thing. He says that is ma yuthabu ala tarkihi. It is if you leave it, you're going to be rewarded. Wala yu'aqabu ala fi'lihi. And if you do it, you're not going to be punished. This is the understanding of things that are makruh. This is to the jumhur. Who are the jumhur? What did we say? Majority of the scholars. But what does that really mean? What does majority of the scholars mean? The three schools. Right? The three schools which are Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. The other outside of the jumhur, Ahlul Hanaf, the Hanafis. So when we say makruh, this understanding only applies to them. In the Hanafi madhab, and really we said we're not going to be going into the way they look at things. In the Hanafi madhab, they have two types of makruh. They have makruh at-tanzih and makruh at-tahrim. Makruh at-tahrim means the same thing as haram. Makruh at-tanzih means this meaning here. And what you find is they will look at things, and again, this goes back to the usul, like what foundations were laid out for them. And they will go back, and they have this understanding of mahdhur, of haram, can only be what? Allah and His Messenger. Haram has to have been made by Allah and His Messenger. We are not in a position to take and say things are halal or haram, except what Allah has said are halal and Allah has said are haram. So what does this mean? Everything else is going to fall into makruh, disliked. Even actions in which, like the jumhur look at it and say these are haram actions, but they have differentiated into these two levels. So our understanding makruh is things that if you leave them off, you're going to be rewarded. If you do them, you're not going to be punished. An example of something that is makruh, it is standing while you're drinking, blowing into your drink, making istinja with your left hand, exceeding when you're making wudu with yaqeen over the 3 times. So washing your hands more than 3 times. This is something that is disliked. Right? Washing your face more than 3 times in the act of wudu is something that is disliked. These are things that are makruh. Then he says, wal-mahdhur. Here, it means haram. What is haram? He says, here it is, ma yuthabu ala tarkihi, that if you leave it, you're going to be rewarded. Wa yu'aqabu ala fi'lihi, and if you do it, you're going to be punished. Anything that is haram. Any ruling that someone tells you is haram, the understanding is if I leave it, it's going to be, the reward is going to be given to me. But if I do it, I'm going to be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, like the actual understanding is talabu tarki jazima. Like you're commanded to leave it, like definitely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And these are all things that are ahkam at-taklifiyya.
So al-mahzur is not zawajib, it's like very close.
So mahdhur, it's if you leave it, if you don't do it, you're going to get rewarded. If you do it, you're going to be punished. Wajib is if you do it, you're going to be rewarded. If you leave it, you're going to be punished. So just the punishment and the reward is switched around. So the mahdhur, if you leave it, you're going to get rewarded. If you leave the wajib, you're going to get punished.
Can we say this is halal and haram?
So this is haram here. Mahdhur is haram. So the mahdhur is haram.
Can you give a good example, please?
So example, something that is haram.
المحظور, yeah.
So mahdhur is haram. So what is haram?
That's alcohol.
So alcohol. So you have
The alcohol is like in the Quran is far like to leave it.
yeah to leave it So this is all the haram are things you have to leave. If you do them like there's sins that you fall into one time, which is like zina, right? Zina is haram. Zina is mahdhur. Here, the wording that he's given is mahdhur. And instead of haram, he says mahdhur. If you do zina, you get punished. If you leave it, what happens? You get rewarded for it. Another one, let's look at riba. You engage in it, you get punished. You leave it, you get rewarded. Is that clear? So these rulings, not all, Assalamu alaikum. These rulings apply to even like the not just the ones that التي طريقها الاجتهاد, right? Not only the ones that they come to, in general Islamic rulings, whether like salah falls under wajib, right? But it's not, we don't get to that ruling through ijtihad. He's giving you just the ahkam of sharia, the different rulings of the sharia when it comes to.
I have a question. When you say that like you rewarded if you leave it, does that mean like you were tempted and you decided not to do it, or it never crossed your mind and you're getting rewarded?
So for us, let's say, alhamdulillah, I don't think any of us here have the desire of drinking. We're not going to be rewarded for not drinking, right? That reward, because we're not thinking of drinking. We're not in the temptation to drink. But let's say we were people, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this, that we go to places where there's always people drinking. We're invited to these gatherings and we go, and then someone tells, hey, it's just one cup or one shot or whatever it is, take some. And we say, no, we're going to leave it. That's when you're going to get rewarded, right? So these definitions that he gives is through the thamar. Right? He's giving you the fruits of the thing. What it means is you have been commanded to leave this like with an order. There is no option. That's what the mahdhur is. Allah has commanded you to completely leave it off. So when it comes to all like riba, I don't think any of us here are thinking of engaging in riba. So we're not going to get rewarded for not doing it. But if we're in that place where that presentation comes and we say, I'm going to leave it off, we get that reward for it.
Can we say we get rewarded as if my intention, I'm not doing the haram because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me not to do it. So my intention,
you're always getting rewarded.
Because it's not because it didn't get offered to me. No, I didn't even.
I don't even think about it.
I know this is haram. I thought, but you know, I think this is where he's coming from. My yusab ala Turkey. That's but you have to be intentional.
And it'll completely leave it
I'm
off.
following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guide, so I'm not doing that because it's haram. End of the story. So I guess.
Yes. So every morning we should wake up and say, today I'm not going to engage in haram. For all the haram we leave us, we should get rewarded. So
yeah, inshallah.
Inshallah. That will be our hope.
And this day is not easy. Like,
it's not.
I'm sorry, all the examples I said here, it's not easy.
Yeah, Allah make it easy. Allah make it easy. So then these are ahkam at-taklifiyya, which means there's three people that this is talking to. Who are they? Or three categories, like three things a person has to have for these things to apply to them. Over there, huh?
They're adults and mentally sane, and those who remember Allah.
Those who remember Allah. Adults, not in 18 or 21. Adults as in al-baligh, right? Al-aqil, the one that his mental capabilities are there. And then the one that is in a state of remembering, not that he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but like he knows these things, right? Al-dhakir. Not always in a constant remembrance of God or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but someone that like his mental capabilities are fully there. So because of that,
Can you yeah, sorry.
So this third one, al-dhakir, is only when, let's say, what they're trying to do is take out actions that are done out of nisyan. Someone that, for example, is in salah. This is not a ruling, just giving you an example. Somebody's in salah. We know eating in salah breaks your salah, right? We know drinking in salah breaks your salah. Or actually, a better example. Let's go to a better example. You're fasting. Eating, drinking breaks your fasting. The one that drinks or eats out of nisyan, in that state of forgetfulness, is his salah, is his Ramadan or fasting broken? No. So they're like restricting it from that aspect to restricting it to the one that is not in that state of an-nisyan, remembering that these are like what need to be done. Does that make sense? Jazakallah khair. Those three, and then there's a fourth one which inshallah will never apply to any of us, which is someone that is in captivity. Someone that is in like captivity and he's forced to do things. That one, he's out of these things, out of these rulings and these things applying to him. Then those are at-taklifiyya. Al-wad'iyya, which is the next two, and we said a possible third, which to him, he doesn't differentiate. So he says, as-sahih wal-batil. As-sahih, authentic or right. And he says, ما يتعلق به النفوذ ويعتد به أي ويعتد به في الشرع. He's telling you, as-sahih are things that are correct and things proceed as they should be. An example of this is a nikah. Nikah is a contract. When a man and a woman gets married, and we say this nikah is sahih, what that means is if one of them passes away, the other is going to inherit from it. This is a lot. This is because it is a contract that was sahih. The opposite, which is al-batil, is if they got married and the nikah was batil, they could never inherit from one another. They could never come together. Or let's say I'm selling you something, and in this transaction that we're given to one another, we did not meet all of the conditions that need to be met for it to be authentic. That exchange of ownership can never happen. Right? If I sell you this book for $5 and you don't give me the $5, is this a agreement that has been fulfilled? And I give you the ownership of the book? No. Even if he takes the book, or I sell you something that I don't own, for example. I don't own this book, but I tell you, I'll sell this to you for $5. I can never give you this thing because we have broken the commands. This is in mu'amalat, in things that we do. These two conditions or these two rulings are a part of it. They are also a part of ibadah in the sense that they are conditions. There's shurut, there's sabab, and mani' and preventions that have been made in every single type of ibadah that we do. For example, salah, we know it's wajib. We said salah is wajib. If salah is wajib and I come and I pray without wudu, is this sahih or is it batil? It's batil. Because a condition that was there, ahkam al-wad'iyya that was put there, has been nullified. So the salah does not count. And because it does not count, I have to pray again. That isqat al-khitab is still there. Like the command hasn't been removed from me to pray. So this is what these two rulings mean. The third one that he doesn't differentiate here is al-fasid. Right? You have really a difference between batil and fasid. In some schools, there's like a big difference. In other schools, there's not really that much of a difference, except in Muwatin al-Hajj and in like some other very minor things.
What does nufood here? What does it mean?
And nufood means like it's correct and it proceeds as it should. Right? So that like it proceeds, the actual translation, it proceeds correct and it's fulfilled. Right? Like the ahd, nafad al-ahd, like he's fulfilled that covenant. Hey. No. So the only time that fasad and batil are different in the Jumhur, it's in very small places. For example, in Hajj, in the Shafi'i method, a person that becomes a murtad, he leaves Islam in the mawatin of Hajj while he's doing the rituals of Hajj, his Hajj is batil. There's no continuation. His Hajj ended because he became a murtad. If he becomes a Muslim again, he has to start over Hajj. Right? But if let's say somebody, you are in the state of ihram from the beginning of Hajj until Ayyam Mina, if you do all of the things. There's two types of, removing yourself from ihram. There's the minor one and there's the major one. The major one, there's three things that you have to do on Yawm al-Nahr, right? The day of slaughter, the day of that's Eid. Here you would have to Jamara, Tawaf, and cutting your hair. If let's say you do the first two, you can take off your ihram. You can start using things that are scented, right? Soap that is scented. Your clothing no longer cannot have stitches. But the thing that you're not allowed to do is what? Al-Jam. Al-Jam. Let's say somebody comes together with their spouse on Hajj. Before they've done this, their Hajj now has become fasid. Their Hajj is corrupted now. And they have to do something afterwards, a fidya or something to make up for it. And then next year, they would have to come and fulfill that aspect. In this place, and in very small other minor places, is really batil and fasid different to the Jumhur. But to our Hanafi brothers, there's a very big difference. If you want, again, like I said last week, you can go to the books and figure it out, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Now he has stopped. This is what, can someone keep an eye on the time? Next time we're together, we will not go over these in this much details. It will just be reading English translation and we'll go forward. So nufud, the one that we're going to use, it's the whole thing when it says as-sahih. ما يتعلق به النفوذ. It is correct. For you just use correct and proceeds as it should be, or goes forward as it should be. That would be the easiest one. So now he is going to finish up. This is, by the way, this is the muqaddimah of this work. This is an introduction into this work. Today we're going to try to finish his introduction. We don't really know anything about usul al-fiqh. Not yet. He'll tell us what it actually means. He's just given us some tools that we need to have before we can, as beginners, go into usul al-fiqh. So he says, وَالْفِقْهُ أَخَصُّ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. And this is on page 3, the first line. He says, fiqh. It is more specific than ilm, than knowledge. The fiqh that he's referring to here is what? What is the meaning? The thing that we went through before. So he says that is more general than knowledge. And that's easy to understand. Ilm,
More specific.
yeah, more specific, yes. Ilm is more general than fiqh. The way that we should look at it is every single type of fiqh is ilm. Every single type of ilm is not fiqh, right? So ilm is every knowledge. Math, or let's restrict it to the sharia. You have, hadith, you have tafsir, you have even fiqh itself, right? This is general ilm. Then he goes, fiqh, the understanding, is the meaning that we gave you early is very, very restricted and is very specific to what we want to go to. Now he's already described to you fiqh and all of the different words that you need. Now he wants to make you understand what ilm means, what knowledge means. And he says, al-ilmu, knowledge, is ma'rifatul ma'lumi ala ma huwa bihi. It is to perceive what is knowable, the things that you can know, to perceive it as they are. For example, earlier we heard the kids. We heard sound. We know those were human sounds. So that tells us there's going to be children that are there, or there's going to be some type of people there. This is what ilm is, right? Then he goes, we'll jump forward and then come back. He says, wal jahl, the opposite of ilm, ignorance. He says, tasawwuru shay'i ala khilafi ma huwa bih. It is to perceive something opposite of what it is. Opposite of what it is. You hear those kids and you say, I hear animals, even though we use this, right? But you say these are animals. Like in the linguistic term of, an animal with 4 legs, walks on this way, there's these things. This is someone that has a jahl murakkab, compounded ignorance, right? The person that, the first meaning, to know something as it should be, think we have chairs there. To know something as it should be is like to the best of your ability to know that this is what it is. And if you don't know it, then you have jahl basit. You have you have a slight ignorance. And everyone has these type of ignorances. And this jahl that he is telling us about here is the complete opposite. It is a person, for example, I go to you and I say, praying salah in the masjid, what's the ruling for it? And you say, I don't know. This person, he's ignorant, very small ignorance on his part of this. You go to somebody and you say, the ruling of praying in the masjid in jama'ah, what's the ruling? He says it's haram. This one, he doesn't know. So there's jahl there, there's ignorance there. On top of that, he doesn't know that he doesn't know. So that is compounded ignorance that he has. The one, he doesn't know, nor does he know that he does not know. And this is really the worst type of place that you can be in. Right? To think that I know this thing while you don't know. The first person he could be taught. We can get together and talk about these are the proofs why you don't know the salah in the masjid is like the ruling of it. We can fix that. But the one that tells you it is haram, this is on a different level. Or somebody, actually we'll go through it and we'll get to some of the things that he mentioned. So he says, he gave you ilm, he gave you the opposite. Now he's going to break down ilm for you. Because there's two types of ilm. And here, he is giving you the ilm of creation. He's telling you the ilm of creation. He says, al-ilm al-daruri, there's one that, like necessary knowledge, that is ما لا يقع عن نظر واستدلال كالعلم الواقع. He says, it is knowledge that you don't have to ponder over, nor do you have to go and look for the lead for it. For example, every single one of us here knows that fire is hot. How many of us have been burned by fire to understand that it's hot? Maybe a few of us. May Allah protect the rest of us, right? All of us know the sun is above, the sky is above us. The ground is below us. These are things that we just know, right? They're not things that I have to sit and think and look for proof to prove that the sky is above me, or that fire is hot, or that when I hear thunder, rain is generally going to come after. These type of things, it is al-ilm al-daruri. Like you know it, and without having to ponder over it and look for proof. And then he says, like knowledge that comes, you know, the five senses that we have, these five senses that you know knowledge through them. We heard those kids, we know there's kids there. We hear cars passing by, we know the cars are there. Somebody comes, knocks at the door, we hear the knock, or when we're knocking, we feel I can knock here and tell you this is wood. I can feel this fabric and tell you this is a type of fabric. I can taste something, and then what happens? I can tell you whether it tastes good or whether it tastes bad, if it's sour or if it's sweet. Or, so did I mention the five senses? Another, seeing, hearing, touch, taste, smell. That was the last one. When you smell, when you smell something and you can tell whether it smells good or not, these are not things that you actually have to be taught. Right? These are things that you are just going to automatically know. That, when you give a child, first time you give them a lemon, and they make that face after they taste it. This is not something they had to ponder and say, let me do it. Like they know right away that this does not taste the way I want it to taste. Right? So those type of things, this is ilm al-daruri. Or he says the next thing is bit-tawatur. Or the knowledge of it becomes so widespread that we have no option in being ignorant of it. For example, how many of us have been to China? Somebody raised their hand. Transit. For those of us that have not been in transit to China, can we say China does not exist? Because even though we've never been there, we know it exists. And you could take this like when knowledge is so widespread. For example, how many hours are in the day? 24 hours. There was a time where they had to do another wastidlal for this, right? But now it has become tawatur. It has spread to the point where this is we know what this is. We know that there's a place called Philistine. We know that there's this amount of people that, or this general number, there's a lot of people, right? We know that people are of different races. These are things that, because of how much widespread it became, it becomes a tawatur. Now, all of these words that we hear, the definition that he's given, they are only meant to be used by usul al-fiqh, in the study of fiqh, not in the other, in like study of something else. For example, if somebody comes to you and tells you that this thing is a tawatur, depending on how they use it, would be a different meaning than the one that we've used it. So keep this in mind. And then he says, the next type of knowledge, of ilm, is ilm al-muktasab. It is knowledge that is like you get through deducing and reasoning. He says, ما يقع عن نذر واستدلال. You get it through pondering over it, thinking about it, and you deduce the, you reflect on it, and then you look for the adilla for it, and then you have gotten to this ilm of ilm al-muktasab. For example, if I ask you, outside of this place, how many car parking spaces are there? You can't tell me a number now, right? Because you don't know it. But if you go there and you say, he wants to know how many parking spots are here, I'm going to count it. So once I count it, I'm going to come back and say it's 30 parking spots. This is knowledge you have to think about, and knowledge that you have to ponder over in order for you to say this, like this is the acquired knowledge that I have. And he doesn't want you to guess any words. He doesn't want you to like say, this is what he's telling me. He's going to break down every single word for you. So he says, وَالنَّظَرُ, because he's used that word twice by now. Right? So what is nazar that he keeps telling me? And then he says, هو الفكر, that it is the thinking, في حال المنظور فيه. It is you thinking of the object that you're thinking about. Same example, the parking spots. It is you going and pondering or like thinking about it. You're like, okay, this is one parking spot here. Then I have to think about, here's another one, and so on. Then the other word that you heard was al-istidlal. And then he says that is talab dalil. It is looking for dalil, or it is you seeking proof. He says al-istidlal. In the Arabic language, alif, sin, ta, what do they mean? To seek. Alif, sin, ta means to seek. Example, we say istighfar. Well, what are we doing? Like he is seeking forgiveness. An intisar. What with sin here? What does it mean? He is seeking a nasr. They replaced the sin with the side here. But same thing. So you are seeking something, a talab. These are, whenever you see alif, sin, ta, anywhere, someone is a talab. It means talab. He's looking for something. And you can think of many words for it. So he says it is you seeking proof. And he says al-istidlal, you have alif, sin, ta, and then dalil. So you are looking for dalil. You are looking for proof. The parking spot, you are first thinking about it. Now let me look for proof. What am I going to do? I'm going to count it. And then he says, what's the next word? What dalil? He told you you're looking for dalil. So what is dalil? What does it mean? He says, huwa al-murshid ila al-matlub. That is what, like you are seeking, that you are seeking something, the things that are going to lead you to what you were seeking. So dalil, it's what were you seeking? The question that I asked was how many parking spots? You are seeking how many parking spots? So you are going to look for proof to prove what? That matlub that I gave you, that thing that I was asking you for. So what leads you to it is going to be dalil, the dalil. Or another better definition that the usuliyun give for this, for الدليل, it's ما يتواصل بالصحيح النظر فيه إلى المطلوب. It is what you look at, what you are looking for, like with all of the correct ways of looking in order for you to get to what you are seeking. For example, we could have somebody here that goes outside and he sees the parking lot, and he sees the spaces, and there's an easy way of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the end, and you tell us. But then he goes to the parking lot, and instead of counting, he just goes, like, he looks around. And then he comes and he says, this is the number. And he's completely wrong. Why? Because he didn't use like the proper ways of getting to this. Now, what does this mean? It means in the Sharia, in fiqh, you can seek dalil a number of ways. There's the correct way of looking for it and the incorrect way of looking for it. For example, somebody comes to you and says, do you know, we know riba is haram. He says, no, actually, better example. He comes to you and he says, do you know that a man and a woman that are not related can ride on an animal together? Can ride on an animal together. Then you ask him, what's the proof for that? He tells you that the Prophet ﷺ one day was riding a camel and Asma was there. Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, I wanted her to come get on the camel behind me. So he says, the Prophet ﷺ wanted. So that means it's permissible. Because the Prophet ﷺ only wants something that is permissible. There's an error he made somewhere along the line in getting to this thing. That same person, you would go to him and you would tell him, hey, do you know that praying in the masjid is wajib? You have to pray in the masjid. And he tells you no. And you tell him, the Prophet ﷺ said, I wish I can find somebody to lead the salah and then go and burn down the houses of every house that has a man inside and burn it down. So you tell him, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to do it. And he would only want to do some things allowed. And he tells you no. Here, he just wanted it. Right? The same person that told you earlier, Prophet ﷺ wanted and he could only want halal. There are what is the difference between these two scenarios here? Is the way that you're going to look at them, right? To look at it in a wrong way would be what the man would do, and he would say, here, the Prophet ﷺ only wants something that is allowed. Here, he would tell you, the Prophet ﷺ could have found somebody to do it, but he still didn't do it. He could have found somebody to lead, because he let other people lead. So why didn't he do it? So because of that, it shows us that he didn't actually want to do it. He went wrong somewhere in these two lines. By the end of this book, keep these two in mind. You're going to understand where he went wrong. Is that clear? These two examples. So it is looking at it and with the right tools at the dalil to be able to come to a proof. That is what he's telling you the dalil is, or how you get to ilm al-muktasab, knowledge that is, you need to do some reflection, some rulings. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. And then he gives you two more words, actually would be three more words. He says, al-dhannu. The next word that he brings is dhann. And he says, al-shakku. Al-dhann, he says, tajweezu amrayni ahaduhuma adharu min al-akhar. It is that al-dhann, here we'll say doubt. You have doubt. He says it is, you look at two matters, and one of them is more apparent, or one of them seems to be more correct. Fiqh is built on dhann. Fiqh is built on what? It's built on dhann. It's not built on knowing something in ilm. It's known on like doubtful things. And that's why you have ikhtilaf in what? You have ikhtilaf in the rulings that they come through, because all of fiqh that we're going to be discussing is dhann, is based on doubtful things. So he says, you look at it, and one of them seems adhar min al-akhar. What this literally means is, if one is 47% and the other is 53%, it doesn't mean all the way up to like 80-20, but it only needs to be more adhar in this tiny place for two matters, for you to have dhann in this thing. And this is why they have things, they call it al-qat'i and al-dhanni, like rulings that are 100%, we know this is the ruling for it. And then everything else from there, it is known as al-dhann. Like things that they might be like this is what is apparent to us or to this group of scholars, but it is not with certainty this is what it is. And then he says, وَالشَّكُّ, the opposite of that. He says, تَجْوِيزُ أَمْرَيْنِ لَا مَزِيَّةَ لِأَحَدِهِمَا عَلَى الْآخَرِ. There's no, like, they're at the same level. So doubt, which is different in the English language and in the way that we use it, when we say something is doubtful, we do not mean that they are the same. We mean it that this is, one of them is less than the other. When you ask somebody for a ruling and they tell you this is something that is doubtful, automatically in our minds, we're thinking that this is something that is what? What are we thinking when a matter is doubtful? Generally, we don't think 50-50, like when someone says it. But the thing is, it's 50-50. It's not, I can't tell you to go this way and I can't tell you to go this way. It's in, like, you're here in this 50-50 balance. The first one is there has to be just one is more apparent than the other. A little bit more apparent or a lot more apparent. But generally just a little bit more apparent. And then there's one that he didn't put here, which is al-wahm, which is the opposite of dhann. Huh? Al-wahm. Yeah. So the ruling for it, tajweez al-amrayn, and the other one is there's one that's murjuh, that is more apparent. So the opposite of dhann. Dhann is one is azhar, when the one that's not azhar is called wahm. Right? The one that is lower than, like, you have these two options, one's 55, the other's 45. The 45 one is al-wahm. Is this clear?
So in English though, if you were to translate one and shush, they both translate to
That's
doubt.
a doubtful thing.
So how do scholars differentiate between that in English?
So they would generally just use dhann. They would say dhann.
Yeah.
And so these two things really, when we think about ibadah and when we think about rulings, right? The only time that it's like it makes a big difference is while we're in time, like we're certain ibadahs that we're doing. For example, you're in salah and you know that you have to have wudu. Or you're in salah, you know that dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs, right? You have 4 rak'ahs. On the third rak'ah, you don't know if this is your third or your second. You are going to be in one of these two places. You're going to have dhann that this is third. So that means, like, you're more certain that you're on the third rak'ah rather than the fourth or the second. Shak would be the opposite of that, where you have shak that this is not actually the third one, right? You have doubt in that this is not the third rak'ah, but you don't have dhann that it is the third rak'ah. So dhann is stronger than the shak that you would have. And in general, this is why whenever people pick up a fiqh book, one, you need to have the tools, and you need to have, or someone that has the tools that can tell you, because they're not going to differentiate between these two things, especially when it's translated. When it's going to be the same thing. So someone will look at it and think, doubt, khalas, same thing here. But that's not what they're talking about. And that's why we need to have this understanding before we go into the works of fiqh.
Okay, so in the Quran, يا الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن.
So that is a different one. This is a one that is only used for usul fiqh. That one is suspicion, like having suspicion of people, right? But this one is different. Just like we talked about makruh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us, إن الله كره عليكم القيل وقال وقيل وكثرة السؤال. Allah hates for you, he says, she says. And he also hates for you asking a lot of questions. Is this hate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the same as the makruh that we talked about? It's completely different. That one means haram. But inna Allah kariha, this hate is in a different word than the usul fiqh that we're using. So these istilahat that are here, these wordings, these terminologies, only apply to these people. For example, we'll get to one where it says, where they're going to talk about hadith mursal. And that is going to be different than what the people of hadith actually say what that means. Right? Because this is what the usuliyin came together and decided, and this is what these words mean to us. So this dhann is different than that dhann over there. And then,
My
question was like the difference between one and check. If you were to translate them, that one is doubt that it is something, and check is doubt that it is
not something. Yep. And mathematically, this is usually how they explain it, right? They give you the numbers. One is when something is more than 51%. So 51 to 99. That is one. Shak, it is 1 to 49. This is shak. That's what these two here, they mean. Let's move back a little back to Dalil. Alhamdulillah, it's 11 o'clock. We'll finish on this part of Dalil. Dalil that he's also going to talk about to us here. Imam al-Juwayni, rahimahullah, what madhab is he from? Who knows? Allahu Akbar, Shafi'i. So, to the Shafi'is, the things that are considered Dalil, you have, obviously, the Quran and the Sunnah, right? You have the Ijma', which is consensus, and then you have Qiyas, which is analogies. And then you have Istishab. Istishab al-Amr. We'll get to that when we're going through the book. Other groups, other madhahib, some of them have, for example, qawl al-Sahabi, that a statement of a companion is proof. In our madhab, this is not proof. I'm looking around and I'm still thinking majority of us here are Shafi'is. Am I correct in this assessment? Our brothers from Muslim, just keep your hands down. This is khalas. We are all Shafi'is here. Right? Qawl al-Sahabi, the Sharia that came before, it is not proof for us. Things like al-urf, it is not dalil in the Shafi'i madhab. In the Maliki madhab, for example, al-urf in the sense of the actions of the people of Medina is dalil for them. So you would have, they would look at what the companions in Medina did or the people of Medina did, and they will take this as rulings. For us, only the 5 that we have mentioned, everything else is out of the window. And because of this, this is how you see the differences really come about. Why? Because someone considers the statement of a Sahabi as dalil, as a proof, while another school does not consider it as a proof. So they're not even going to look at that statement of the companion. But this other madhab would look at it and say, this is our ruling in this matter because this companion said so, right? Or you would see they use the actions of the people of Medina. You would say, we see this as a proof for this action. The people that don't take that as proof, what are they going to say? The complete opposite. This is batil, this is falsehood here, right? And because of this, all of the differences of the different madahib, this is where it comes from. How their usul was built, how it was founded. Because of that, you have these different types of ruling. You have one matter, someone will tell you, and the scholars differed on it. For example, and we'll finish here, touching a woman. Does it break your wudu or not? Bismillah. Does it break your wudu? In our madhab, it breaks your wudu. If to make wudu, you can pray when you touch the woman. And this touching is what? This kind of touching, right? In the other madhahib, does it break your wudu? No. Why? Because their usul, the way they look at what can be taken as proof, what can be made stronger than the other, determines the ruling that they're going to come to. Right? So whenever you see differences of opinion, it's not that like Islam is not certain on rulings, but it's just how did these group of scholars look at it and what was the understanding. And by the way, this matter of touching the woman, both sides use the same exact ayah in the Quran to prove their point. And generally, this is how it is. They would look at the same dalil, but they would have a complete, different understanding of it. The perfect example of this is that the Prophet ﷺ, he sent a group of companions to a place. And he told them, don't pray Asr until you get there. The companions are traveling and Asr time comes in. One group of them prayed and they said, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us to hurry to get there before Asr. So when we get there, we pray Asr there. But it does not mean that we're going to delay our Asr until we get there. The other group meant we cannot pray Asr anywhere except we get to that place we're told to get to. Same proof, but different ways of looking at it and the different understandings, I think. And this is normal, right? You look at one thing and we have different understandings. And because of this, you have the difference of opinions in the different madhab. And even in the same madhab, right? In the same madhab, you would have the majority opinion and then you have the minority opinion. And what this means is they looked at the same things, and this is the understanding that they came to. Let's see.
I just have a question about the touching women. I'm assuming that you don't mean like women, other women, like touching women, like if I put my arm around another
No,
woman.
just that's the man.
But okay, does that include your?
They say
Is that your mahram?
even your wife.
So your mahram.
Yeah, your mahram. Even touching your mahram breaks you like that. Right? And what do the other madhabs, like the other madhabs, when they talk about this, they say, the Prophet ﷺ used to kiss Aisha radiallahu anha before he went to the masjid. And he wouldn't make wudu in the time that he went to the masjid. Therefore, it doesn't break your wudu. Or in the Sadat al-Shafi'iyya, they said, Allah said, أَوْ لَمَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ. If you touch the woman, breaking wudu, go make wudu. Right? So what do they give preference to here? The hadith or the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how you have all of the differences come about because of the usul that, by the way, today, alhamdulillah, we just finished the muqaddim, the introduction. Next, he's going to tell you what usul al-fiqh is. Right? And then he tells you, this is the rulings he deals with. These are some of the things that are there. Go ahead. So she never got on the back. Yeah. Yeah. The Prophet said, I remember how he would be, so I just left it. Right, I didn't tell her to actually get and I'll push it. Get on the thing. But he didn't let her get on because of how he knew Zubayr would be. Right? So it's like, okay, just even though I want to do this, I'm going to leave it. Right? So now I think your question is, what do we do if we're in that situation? Yeah. You tell them, the Prophet ﷺ not wanting to do it, and the fact that he didn't do it. Right? He didn't do it shows you that if he wanted to, he would have done it. But because he didn't want to do it, that tells you that you can't do it. And then besides that, like there's other proofs for why you can't do that. Right? There's like proofs of not, again, when you're on the camel, what's going to happen? You're going to be touching each other. Right? And because of like those other proofs that point to the impermissibility of it, we say this is what it is. Right? Inshallah, when we get through it, this will become very, very simple. We are going to know. Give us how long do we have left? This is our third time to go. Second for you guys. For some of us here first. But we've been here, this is the third one, right? So inshallah we should have about 9 more. My math is like that. In our madhab or every. So in our madhab, the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma', which is consensus, and even here, Ijma'. Now there's people that are restricted to the companions. Only what the companions agreed to can be considered Ijma'. Not because you can't get, really, if you think about it, can we ask all of the Muslim scholars to say that the Ummah has consensus that this is the ruling for this? You can't do that. Right? So they restricted to only the companions, and then the next one is qiyas, like analogy. For example, let's see what's haram by qiyas. There's a lot of things. We look at, the easier way. What is halal by qiyas? Praying on a plane. Did the Prophet ﷺ pray on a plane? Obviously not. There's no planes. But what can we say is similar to a plane that the Prophet ﷺ prayed on so that you and I can do that? The camel, a dabba, the animal that the Prophet prayed on. I'll give you another one someone asked me recently. Someone said, can I make tawaf with a scooter? Can I make tawaf with a scooter? Okay. And can we prove to him you can actually make tawaf with a scooter. Yeah. Why? The Prophet ﷺ made tawaf on a camel. And if you can make it on a camel, that means anything that could take that place of the camel, you can do it. But you only have to be on the second floor, right? Because that's where they keep people for the scooters. Don't come and bother us in tawaf. Go upstairs. It's much longer. Take your scooter. Like, you know, they made it for the people in wheelchairs. And even when you go to Safa and Marwa, you have like the actual long thing that you have to do. And then they have the express lane in the middle, mashallah, for people with the scooter. I mean, with the wheelchair. And apparently, you just have to pay money. You don't even have to have a need to be in the scooter. I wish this was things we know when we went to Hajj. Allah accepted. So that is what like qiyas is, using analogy to come. If istishab, we'll get to that qiyas. That's the fifth one in the Shafi'i. We'll get to that maybe 2 weeks from now. So that would be, you know, how do you use that in istishab? We'll bring it here, inshallah. Any more questions?
For the statement from the companions, for the most part, hadith, I think we say for the most part.
So here, when they say like, oh, the Sahabi, even like one companion, right? So we don't, like, in the madhab, we don't take the opinions of one companion as ruling, right? But if it's a group of them, we take that as a ruling. Because sometimes, like, you know, when we think about the companions, we think of them as, it was like monolith. They agreed on everything, right? But in reality, there's times where they're warning from the rulings of one another. Like you have, for example, Aisha radiallahu anha. She says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never urinated while he was standing. Whoever tells you that, he's a liar. Whoever tells you the Prophet sallallahu urinated standing, he is a liar. Then you have Hulayfa radiallahu anhu, another companion of the Prophet that said, we saw him urinate standing. We saw him doing it. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ, there were times where he urinated standing up. When he would pass places where it would be unclean for him to be sitting. And we have people coming and giving salams to the Prophet ﷺ as he's urinating, standing. And then he wouldn't respond to the salam. Then he would go back to them and say, I did not want to give you salams because of the state that I was in. I didn't want to make dhikr because of the place that we were in. So when we look at all of this, what do we understand? Right? It's whose opinion are we going to take? There's one companion saying this, and there's other groups of companions saying this. So you can't say, Aisha said, possibly never prayed, never urinated standing, so none of us can do it. But when you bring it all together, then you understand. Aisha radiallahu anha, she never saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam urinate standing. And that is true because when he would use, you know, the place of the bathroom inside of like where they would live, he would not do it standing. But when he would be, you know, places where people would throw their garbage outside where it wouldn't be clean to sit down, so he would do it in that manner. And the companions would see the Prophet doing that. And all of this comes from, you know, how they spent their time with the Prophet. Right? And then one more. Even like companions, really. Those of you that were in the Sirah class this Thursday, what is the first surah that is revealed to the Prophet? Iqra, right? We all understand here the first surah that was revealed to the Prophet Iqra. This is the statement of Aisha radiallahu anha. But did all the companions agree that this is the first surah? No, we did not agree. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he says the first surah that was revealed to him was Mudaththir. Right? The first surah was Mudaththir. Because all of this is like, whose do we take here really? And here it's a little bit easier because we're not taking rulings from the first surah to be revealed, but just to understand that the companions within themselves used to have disagreements on things. Another example. I think this is enough examples. I see people looking at their phones. Any questions? We'll finish. Yes, every time I tell myself we're going to stop at 11, somehow I keep talking until 11:30. It's 11:14. Let's go to 11:20. So, yeah, let's take my time. No question. خلاص كده. جزاكم الله خيرا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive my shortcomings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us understanding. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا. See you all next week. Again, you can get the free books, inshallah. Just make sure you donate. It's free, but you have to donate. I don't know if our brother Hisham was able to tell us who donated. And just